Hi, welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. Today is a great show. Our co-host, Pieta Blakely, attended the American Evaluation Association's annual conference. That's a mouthful. Let's try to do that 5 times. And boy, has she learned a lot. And today we are dedicating our show solely to new trends and development in evaluation. So pick up your cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for the next 30 minutes.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Time with Masterminds. My name is Pieta Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, founder and principal of To Your Growth.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
Hi again. Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. This is a 30-minute conversation for and with leaders of mission-based organizations. We want to welcome our viewers in the U.S. And if you are joining us, please put your name and where you're from in the comments, and also our listeners in Australia. Thank you so much. So, like every profession, evaluators also have an association, and it is important for them to continue their learning. Believe it or not, there are new trends and developments in the world of evaluation. And today, our co-host is going to tell us all about it. So welcome my co-host and the one who is, and our guest today, Pieta. Yay! You're welcome. How are you, Pieta?
Good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I can't wait to hear about the conference. But first, where was it located? I always like to know where.
We went to New Orleans.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what was the weather like?
Perfect.
Oh.
Yeah, it was perfect. It was, 75, 80 degrees, sunny. It was perfect.
And isn't the food there amazing?
Yes. Yep.
Oh.
I was, and I had not been there in a long, long time.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't have high hopes. I had never planned a trip to New Orleans. I didn't particularly have a reason to go there. I was really surprised at how beautiful it is, and how many small local restaurants that I just dropped into that were just absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, they are amazing. And so you didn't go during Mardi Gras, but
no, I probably was there the perfect week. I told my husband I would absolutely go back, but probably just in this specific week. It's not the middle of summer. It's not Mardi Gras. It's not hurricane season. This is probably the only week to visit. Yeah.
Okay. But is there still, I'm going to imagine there's still some kind of celebrating going on.
I think so. And I kind of avoided that area.
Okay.
Yeah. There is a late night party, very alcohol based area. That it was easy to avoid, and the rest of it was beautiful. Yeah,
That's awesome. And so one of the things that we advocate on this show is the continuous learning. We learned that especially during our leadership series, where we even did a show on, do seasoned leaders need to continue their learning? And so we found that people across all professions should continue their own learning, whether to personally develop or because it's mandated, because a lot of them are, such as doctors and nurses and people in that field. But tell me a little bit about your philosophy of learning, because you run your own business. So you technically don't have somebody saying, Pieta, you have to go to this conference.
and I spend a lot more. I would say now that I budget for my own continuous learning, I probably budget a lot more than most of my previous employers did. I think it's especially important when you're working alone to get out of your environment in whatever way you can and see what other people are doing and get new ideas and get new perspectives and see your work a little bit differently. Evaluators in general are often isolated, right? It's pretty common to have one evaluator in a program or an organization. So going to where all of the evaluators are and seeing how other evaluators are working is, I think, very, very important.
Yeah. Also, evaluators, a lot of times we tend to be on the outside looking in. And even if we interact, the interaction is limited. So I get the isolation.
I remember the first time I went to AEA and I was like, oh my gosh.
People like me.
Right. I had no idea. There are about, this year, I think they said there were 2,500 people registered for this conference. So you can imagine my overwhelm the first time I went, and I had only just figured out that evaluation was a career and that you could be an evaluator all the time. And then I went to AEA and I saw that there are thousands of evaluators. And I was like, oh, I found my tribe. I was so excited.
Yeah. And you really maximize that engagement, but because don't you belong to other subgroups within AEA?
There is a little bit of backstory on the AEA, which is a great organization that even if you are not an evaluator, you might find some benefit in their materials. It's huge and there is a lot. And one of the things that they offer is that there are local chapters or local affiliates of the American Evaluation Association. So there's one in Boston called GBEN, the Greater Boston Evaluators Network. And I'm on the advisory group for GBEN. And I've been involved with GBEN for several years.
So what does an advisory group on Evaluators Association do?
We provide kind of big picture guidance about things like writing the mission statement for GBEN and how they should go about selecting officers and setting strategic direction for things. We don't do much. We show up to a meeting every once in a while and
you network and I also think that setting direction is really important, and I like that they engage members to do that work. In January for 2023, we're going to be talking about boards and how to engage boards, and it's the same process. It's really important when you engage volunteers. So cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big advantage to an advisory board is a little bit broader perspective, right? The people who hold leadership positions in GBEN do a lot, invest a huge amount of time and energy, and are very close to the work. And sometimes our value add as advisory board members is that we're not so close to the work and we take a little bit bigger perspective.
Yeah, I like that. And so I know we've had Ann Urosic from Field Partners here in the past, and she uses the term "fly the plane higher." Right.
Yeah,
so that 30,000 Heifetz, who is a leadership guru, talks about the balcony. So really, getting a broader perspective is key. And I like that you go to these things. If I needed an evaluator, I would totally hire you because you have all this up and coming information, and you're going to talk about trends and development. So what did you learn?
So, we have talked on this show a lot about racial reckoning and how it's a different era. And we have talked about how philanthropy developed in the context of white supremacy, right? Yes. So this conference was about those things, right? Evaluation developed in the context of philanthropy.
Yes.
And philanthropy developed in the context of white supremacy. There is a lot about evaluation that is white supremacist. And this conference was about decolonizing evaluation.
Wow. So can we deconstruct a couple of, or bring definition when you say evaluation is rooted in white supremacy. For those who are still struggling with understanding that, can you give us some examples?
Yeah. So, so there's this fundamental question of like, who are we collecting information from and why, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the programs that we're evaluating problematize individuals, and those individuals are often low income, Black and brown, otherwise minoritized people, right? So, for example, I look at workforce development programs, right? There is this underlying assumption, right? The entire reason that we train some people to do jobs is there's an assumption that the jobs are fine, the economy is fine. It's these people that have a flaw. And if we can add something to these people, then they can go and get those jobs, right? So it is deficit based. There's an assumption that these people are missing something and we can provide it. And it is not particularly attempting to rock the boat in terms of the bigger picture, the economy, the policy, right? The jobs, the structure of the jobs, the employers, all of that, right? So when we're evaluating this program, we start with this assumption, there were some people and they were missing something. And now let's test to see if they've been improved. Yeah.
We do that all the time,
right? That's evaluation. And it is just like, it's just rooted in all that bad stuff, right? Yeah. It's rooted in all that, like, there was something wrong with these people and now we're going to see if they got better.
And if they don't get jobs, because we're talking about workforce as the example. So if they don't get jobs, then is that their problem? Is that the assumption?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Right.
Because we haven't evaluated the employers and we haven't evaluated the ecosystem and we haven't evaluated the transportation system and all those other things that go into having a job.
Right. And we generally have like fairly low standards for how many of those individuals we're going to place, right? Because we don't, and this is the entire reason that I got to be an evaluator. I was really upset about this, that there's an assumption because the participants are low income that their time isn't worth anything and their energy and investment isn't worth anything. And so we don't look at these programs and say, this person bought new outfits, put her kids in childcare, and spent 40 hours a week with us for 8-10 weeks, like a huge amount of time. And so we need to place every single one of these people in a job, right? I mean, I'd be pretty annoyed if I did all that, right? Put all that time in and then did not get a job and move my family out of the shelter outcome, right? But we don't think about it that way. We just think like, if we place some of them, that's better than they were before. Right.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about some programs. I had a friend, he has since retired. Otherwise, we'll bring him on the show because he tells this great story about how he worked. I am not going to name the program. It is very famous. I don't know if they've since fixed, but he no longer uses the curriculum. But he talked, and he admits this. He talks about, it's one of these programs where there's a training with the intention of then finding someone work. And so the training, though, is on reading and math skills, right? So these are people with low literacy and reading and math. And he said that the first time he evaluated the program, because it had never been evaluated, meaning the curriculum had never been evaluated in the organization that he was in. The first time he did it, the scores between pre and post worsened.
Yep.
Like they went this way.
Not surprised.
And he couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Well, you finish the story and then I'll give my hypothesis about why that is happening.
And I can't wait to hear. And so because what he did, because he doesn't have time and he couldn't tell this to his funders. This was at the time where funders were really driving the work and they were like, like you said, rooted in white supremacy. He totally got rid of the curriculum. But he tells this story why outcomes and evaluation is so important. The organization was using the curriculum for years, and people were getting worse over time.
And surprise, the barrier to adults learning math is not math. Other teachers who are perfectly well qualified had like 16 years to teach these people math. Math is not the problem. Trauma is the problem. And you put them in a classroom and start writing math on the board, they all disassociate. This is a massive waste of everybody's time. They have trauma, and then they've added educational trauma on top of that other trauma. They are not learning any math. All you're doing is upsetting them again. Right? And in reality, like, these are capable people who did math, right? I mean, you ask any of these people. I used to have a lot of moms in my courses, and I would say, okay, let's imagine that we've got a cake and we've got to divide it into so many people because there's this many children at the party, right? They can all do all that math. They can double a recipe, they can half a recipe, they can cut the cake. So they know ratios, they know fractions, right? Like, they've been doing all of it. But when you write it in in math symbolism on the board, they're just like, shut down, can't do it. So my hypothesis about what was going on there was these very intelligent people had figured out their own ways to solve these mathematical problems. And that's what they did on the pretest. Then they put them in a classroom and they told them those methods were wrong, and they tried to show them some other methods. And that's what they got on the post-test.
Whoa, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Wow. And this is why you should write a book.
I will put it on my list of books to write.
I could like take the rest of the week off. Well, it's Friday, so we're gonna take the weekend off. But my word, that's a great. I never thought about it that way. What a great point of view. I've never.
And that's the difference that we've segued beautifully into another thing I wanted to bring up, which was asset-based and deficit-based thinking and language.
Yeah.
Right. So the deficit-based perspective on that was, these are people with negative educational experiences, or worse than that, people who just aren't very good at math, right? And then we could get into some, racist backstory about that.
Yeah,
families that don't value education, all of that bad stuff. And so we're going to improve this by giving them math. We're going to fill them up, right? The asset-based frame is, these are intelligent, capable people who have been managing these problems as they come across them. They're resourceful. They are good at getting their everyday needs met.
Yep.
Right. And your version of math just wasn't helpful.
Right. Right. So these are adults that have managed to get through life.
Right. They're doing all the things.
Yeah. And
their budget.
We do math every day. We do math every day. Yeah. I just want to tell a short story because I so resonated with the comment about the cake. So my youngest sister had a birthday and we all went to her house, and there were a lot of people there. It was just family. I'm surprised at how much our family has grown. And so we sang happy birthday, and my sister began to cut the cake. And then my sister has a bachelor's and a master's and in business, so she knows a little bit of math. And so my mother comes to her and says, you're never going to be able to feed everybody the way you're cutting the cake. And my mom took the cake from her. My mom is like Jesus. She couldn't feed a whole town with one fish, right? Yep. And she took the cake and cut it so that everybody had a slice. Yeah. My mom has no college degree, right? No. So you are so right. Yeah. My mom totally saw the issue and and was able to cut it so that she fed everybody. My sister, we would have had to share from each other's plate.
I have a lot of degrees. Yeah. And they're useful for some things. They're not useful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that example. Love that example. And so what else?
Yeah.
What other trends are we seeing?
So what I love about this conference is it's really applied, right? A lot of people are coming to, get ideas and learn things that they can do in their day-to-day work. And so we were talking about a lot of the sessions were on specific action steps and particular ways that you can change how you work to make it less extractive, more equity promoting, and more useful, right? Because I do think that useful evaluation is equity promoting evaluation. And so a lot of the sessions we're talking about let me talk about why I think evaluation is extractive. We have information, we have personal information, we have experience, we have knowledge. Everybody does. A big part of evaluation is asking people for that information. And we don't necessarily pay them. Right? When I'm doing my job and, I'm giving somebody information, I'm getting paid a lot of money, right? When I go onto a program site and I'm asking people to do math tests for me or reflect on their experiences or something, it's really common not to compensate them for that, right? For that time. And that's just one of the ways that we're not valuing the time, the knowledge, and the experience of the individuals that participate in our programs. So one of the things that we talked about was how do we make sure that we are involving community members in every step of the process, right? From like planning evaluations to interpreting the data to reviewing our protocols, right? Everything. I think the interpretation phase is really important, right? How do we make sure that the sense-making part isn't evaluators coming from outside drawing conclusions about the participants without any input from the participants, right?
Yeah.
And so we talked about how to include and some really practical tips, like not just one, right? Don't just get one community member, but right, have a group of community members involved at every step, from the planning to the final product, right? All the way through, and then compensating them for their time, right?
Yeah.
So those were some of the things. And we talked about like just the tension between that and timelines, right?
Oh my, yes.
Yeah, like the actual meaningful participation takes a lot of time, and we often have really short contracts.
Well, that's also rooted in supremacy culture, is this sense of urgency. Yeah. And there are some cultures where there isn't a sense of urgency, right?
Where other things can be more important, like getting everybody's input. Yeah. And
so that's a place that I think becomes harmful because we believe in the name of outcomes and what we'll be able to present and the findings and all of these things that we should then rush through this process. And so it is a pet peeve of mine, this whole timeline thing. So I get that.
That was an important part. And a lot of people were talking about that. I think that's the next step, is like, how do we effectively advocate to, funders and agencies and say that this is going to take a different amount of time. Some evaluators were talking about doing evaluation in contexts that have, where people really have a negative view of evaluation, right? Because they think that they're going to be othered and right. And that it can take a year to build the relationships to even do a productive evaluation.
Yeah. I don't, if there's anything that I would like to see go away, well, there's a lot of things, but one of the things I would like to see go away is this 1 year funding. We should just completely do away with that. Funding should be multi-year, because you're right. It takes a year to build trust. If that. And I remember meeting Jeffrey Canada, who used to lead the Harlem Children's Zone. Yep. And so he said, I was very interested in his origin story. And he said, it's very simple. you could not fund my program. And he was a new program. And he said, I wouldn't take your money if your funding was less than 3 years. Now, there's risk associated with that.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of, please don't send me nasty emails. There are a lot of people who say, well, I wish I can do that.
Yeah.
We can push a little bit more. And if
right. Yeah. you can always ask for a little bit more than you think you can, right?
Yeah.
And there's no point saying no to yourself before you, right? And not giving somebody else a chance.
I know. And so his argument was the kids deserve it. You do a disservice to my kids when you only fund them for a year. I don't want your money.
Yeah.
And look at him today.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen him in 10 years, but I'm sure he's retired.
Yeah.
He's retired. Oh my God, time. Time is such an interesting construct. You also presented though.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Tell me about your presentation.
I was presenting with some colleagues about data visualization and racial equity. Mm-hmm. So yeah, very concrete. We have some information that probably involves numbers, and we're going to put it on a piece of paper, and then people are going to talk about it. That's data visualization. And I got worried a couple of years ago about data visualization and the kind of conversation that it supported. And I was thinking in particular about targeted universalism, which is an approach. It's very common in education, but it applies anywhere where you might have racial disparities. And I said, how would I visualize data differently if I wanted to encourage people to use it in a conversation, about targeted universalism? So targeted universalism is, universalism is, let's just give everybody the same thing, right? And we'll see how they do. And then it's fair and it's equal, right? Mm-hmm. Targeted approaches are, let's give every group or individual what we think they particularly need, and it's different and it's special. Targeted universalism says, we're going to have a high goal for everybody, right? That's universal. Like all of the children will read, right? Mm-hmm. And then we're going to have targeted approaches to make sure that each group is reaching the goal. Mm-hmm. And the approaches are going to be based on the strengths and assets, as well as the barriers of that specific group, right? And so that led me to set up charts differently. I will add in the comments a blog post that I wrote on how I would present some educational data differently, right, for that conversation. And that has led to a whole lot of other interesting conversations about how we can present data for different types of interventions or to support different types of conversations. And, things that have emerged are like the tension between data or information that's useful and violating the privacy of the people in the data set, right? Presenting data in ways that is richer and more complete without asking too much about the reader, right? I mean, if we have data in a visualization that's so complicated that you need a master's degree to read it, right? Then we preclude any of the other stuff I said about like involving community members in the sense-making process.
Yeah.
Right? And I would also just say it's a bad visualization, right? Like if I can't look at your chart and figure out what it's about, right? What I'm supposed to know or what I'm supposed to take away from it, I would say it has not done its job as a communication tool.
I love this. We have a minute left, which is what always happens just when we're getting deep into it. Yeah. And I just want to mention, you said you'll put your blog posts. You should also link the episode that you did on this show. You did.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you liked on this show when we talked about that.
Yeah, it was one of the highest views, and it got almost over 1,000 impressions. It made you famous. And so I think that, what you're saying is really resonating with me, because while many people were on this journey and looking at equity, we also know that as a nation, we saw how little advancement that we have done and how much more work that we have to do as a result of the murder of George Floyd. And so my heart always goes out to him and his family because of the impact that his death has made on this nation. That we could be talking about this is amazing, Pieta. And this is not to say that people like you weren't on this journey prior to George Floyd, but it just feels so natural now to talk about it.
We have a yes, we have a much broader audience. And
it's wonderful.
Change the nature of the conversation.
Well, it is Friday, so we want to wish everybody an amazing weekend, and we look forward to seeing you next week at the same time. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Have a great weekend.